See ya later, bitches.
That would just be
Fandelius.
oh, that felt good.
Imagine being in a hospital, being born for the first time, realizing that that's your first time of existence, having maybe a bad childhood or maybe a good childhood, and getting this sense of nostalgia and wondering, what is that feeling? What is nostalgia? And why do I have it? That, to me, speaks a lot of words. Because when you think of nostalgia and you think of films and TV shows, and we're basically we're in the reboot era, right? We're in the revival era, the reunion era. We like to harken back to those times, and it's as if time has never passed by. This is something that I think about quite a lot, especially when you think about TV shows and other forms of media. But it can also be in your life as a whole. Maybe it's a picture that you took. Maybe it's a video that you took. Maybe you want to just go back to those simpler times when you were a kid, where things were just simple. They were easy, right? Oh, how you wished to become an adult, and how you wish to have all that power that an adult has. And then when you actually become an adult, you start to realize that power isn't what you thought it was. And depending on how you use that power, determines how you want to live your future. Now, this isn't a motivational video, but as I talk about these things in this video, I want you to be imagining your favorite TV show. The first time you sat down to watch your favorite TV show. And then I want you to imagine how you felt when 20 years later that reboot came. The show that you wanted to air forever and ever has finally come back. Do you gravitate towards liking it, or do you gravitate towards hating it because you think the original is a classic that can never be readapted in any sense and never should be readapted? And that's really what a lot of people feel. If you feel that way about how, oh, it's a classic, so keep it a classic, you're not wrong. You're not wrong to feel that way. A lot of people felt that way about the Waltons reboot that just came out. And my mom even thought that as well. But there are some things that other people like to see. And I think I've narrowed it down to why. But first, before I give you that answer, I want to break it down for you. I want you to go through my thought process on how I think and on the things that I think about. And I have a diagram that I'm going to be using throughout this video that is going to help you out when navigating if it's a reunion, a reboot, a revival, direct sequel, a direct prequel, a prequel, a sidequel, or a spin-off. And it all starts with the founding roots, the mothership. The mothership is what I like to call the foundation of a TV show. It is what started it all, for the most part. It's going to be the thing that your original project is going to be on. So, take for an instance Criminal Minds. That right there is the original mothership. The original show, Criminal Minds, is the original mothership. It has a formula to it. It has sidequels. It has spin-offs. And who knows? It might even have, in upcoming months, a direct sequel. And I know what you're gonna say. What are the differences between all the things that I just mentioned?
Well,
A lot of people, in my opinion, get reboots / revivals mixed up. A revival is a direct continuation from the mothership. It might change a few things, some characters may not come back, but it is a direct continuation from the events in the show. It is not, however, a direct sequel. A direct sequel is different. It is the future. As you see on this diagram, a direct sequel is right in front of the mothership. It is different from a direct continuation / revival because it is not coming back from years of being off the air. A direct sequel picks up with the characters that you started with in the mothership and you wanted to continue their story into a direct sequel. That is the future. That is what's going to keep the mothership alive and well, even when it's not alive and well. It's going to keep the mothership together. It's the butter that holds it together. It's the bread and butter of the mothership. And now, you may be wondering,
that's not a direct sequel. Why are you calling it a direct sequel?
because it is a direct sequel. A direct sequel takes the characters from the mothership and moves them forward. Has a different story with a semi-similar premise, but keeps the same characters. It is not a spin-off. It is a direct sequel. It happens directly after the events of when the show ended. But it is not a revival, because a revival is very different. It comes back years, maybe even decades later. That's what a revival is. It comes back. A reboot is more far off into the distance on the right side. Now, let me line all of these up. So far, we have talked about the mothership. We have talked about direct sequels, and we will go deeper into direct sequels. Direct sequels, like I said, are communicating with the mothership. They are not collaborating with. Nope. They are not collaborating with the mothership. It is continuing the mothership's legacy, but in new terms. A revival is after a reunion. Reunions communicate with the mothership, but not all the time. Reunions often are special episodes. They are basically what a family reunion is. You get together maybe once or twice a year, maybe even once every couple years, and you hang out with your family and close friends. That's what a reunion is, and that is similar to how it is with TV films and TV shows. Now, Reunions, in my mind, where they stand, is they stand very close to the mothership. They're closer than revivals are, but they are on the right side. They are right before revivals. Revivals are also close, but have a little bit of a distance between reunions and the mothership. But sometimes they do communicate together. Reboots are far off into the distance. You can almost call them spin-offs, because in a lot of ways, it sort of is a spin-off. Now you may be wondering,
What about the other sides?
well, we have not talked about prequels yet. And there are two different types of prequels, in my opinion. The direct prequel, which is behind the mothership. It's what starts up the mothership's engine. Now, this is where it's going to get kind of confusing, because the mothership doesn't always need to have a direct prequel. Direct prequels are mainly there to serve as a backstory for your story. They only have about maybe a season or two. It's really just to set up the story that you're about to watch. A direct prequel does not come after the mothership. It comes before. Hello.
It's me from the future.
And I just wanted to basically say that I forgot to put sequels after direct sequels. And yeah, so by the way, you're going to be seeing me a lot throughout this video. So
See ya later, bitches.
that's what gets a lot of mothership's engines going. The thing after direct prequels are normal prequels. Normal prequels come after the events of the mothership, but they are still behind because it is still serving the purpose of a backstory. However, that is much later down the road and not a direct prequel. A direct prequel is, let's just say, Criminal Minds had a series that talked about the show beforehand, before the show premiered, and it delved deeper into the characters there to give a good backstory. And it lasted for about maybe a season, maybe 2 seasons. And then at the end of the airing of the direct prequel, you have Criminal Minds that serves as the mothership. Now, that would mean that the show would be the mothership, and the mothership would run for 16 seasons or maybe even more. And it might get a sidequel or a spin-off. Criminal Minds has gotten some spin-offs. We had Criminal Minds Beyond Borders, and we had Criminal Minds Suspect Behavior. Now, the first one you may not remember, but the second one is more memorable. I'm not going to go too deep into these shows. They're decent shows, but I've never really seen them before. I've only seen a couple clips of them. Prequels come after direct prequels. Direct prequels serve as the starting point. Then, and only then, in a lot of cases, can the mothership start its engine and go on for how many seasons. The mothership is still the most important. And I know what you're going to be saying. Well,
Wouldn't that mean that direct prequels are technically motherships?
no. And I only say this because motherships tend to have more seasons to them. Whereas a direct prequel, like I said, only has about 1 or 2 seasons. So that just bewilders your theory right there. Prequels come afterwards, meaning that years down the line, after the show has ended, maybe the show needs a prequel. Maybe it warrants a prequel. Not all the time does it warrant a prequel, but sometimes it does. Disney Plus loves to pick up prequels. Now, let's talk about sidequels. You know Skyrim, right? Skyrim, you have the main quest, and while you're doing the main quests, you can take breaks by doing side quests. I'm sure a lot of people have a lot of side quests that they've done, but guess what? Sidequels are kind of like side quests. the plot of the mothership is still moving forward. But in the middle of the mothership, towards the middle of the seasons, meaning that, let's just say, if the mothership had 10 seasons, on season 5, that's when the show would have a sidequel if it needed to. And sidequels take a character from the mothership and they give them their own show that runs with, that collaborates with the mothership. Now, it doesn't collaborate at all times, but when it does, that's when the true amazing stuff happens. And that's when the show really gets started. And I think that having those two shows work together and collaborate with each other is real big. Now let's talk about spin-offs and reboots. People often get confused with reboots and revivals, like I said previously, and they often confuse it with a spin-off. Spin-offs, at least what they used to be, where you take a concept of a show that you liked, let's just say Criminal Minds, and you make it have its own show, but you change pretty much everything about it. It's not fully a reboot though, it's really not, but the show is different. And you may be wondering,
Well, what's the difference between a spin-off and a sidequel?
sidequels often, and I mean this often, they communicate and collaborate with the mothership. They are on board with the mothership. They probably haven't even left the mothership. They're very close to it. But spin-offs are kind of weird. They're kind of like reboots, where they're just kind of there, you know? They're floating, they're not a part really of it anymore. They're not a part of the mothership anymore. They've gone too far to a different site that they are no longer what they were intended to be. They're no longer close to the original source material, which is the mothership. And that has an effect, because I see a lot of reboots that you might as well just call them spin-offs, because they're not anywhere near as good as what they're trying to reboot. And you could easily slap a different name on them and it would have been perfectly fine. Take Paranormal Activity Next of Kin for an example. My point that I'm trying to make is that they're all different in their own ways. There are some reboots that are closer to revivals, but not quite revivals. Take iCarly 2021 for an example. Technically, I think that's more of a direct sequel, in my opinion. It has a lot of elements of a revival and a reboot, and even sort of a spin-off, but it is sort of a direct sequel. Sort of. But it also is very connected to the mothership. And this is where my way of looking at things, it kind of gets grayed out. Because there's that gray area that's like, okay, iCarly 2021 is one of those that's in that gray area. It's sort of all over the place. And it has an identity crisis. And it's not a good identity crisis at all either. And I think it has a lot of problems. But it is a good show. And it's enjoyable. Now I know you may be saying, well,
Where do all the streaming sites fit in? And also, how has cable changed this?
if I'm being completely honest with you guys, I think streaming sites are what got us to where we are today with the confusion and the gray areas that we have in television today. With the different types of sequels, prequels, sidequels, revivals, reunions, and I haven't even gotten to reunions, really. Anyways, I haven't really gotten to reunions yet, and I'll get to that in a little bit. I think streaming sites ruined the way people make sequels and the way people identify what is a sequel and what isn't a sequel and how to connect it to the mothership. They've lost the genealogy of it. They've lost the family tree that belongs to a successful TV property. And they've made it a convoluted mess because it's so easy to stream it. It's so easy to binge it. So it's, so you lose the formula, and instead you get a very cheaply made show that's on a site where you had to pay $4.99 a month, maybe even more, to watch your favorite show. They half-ass it, and that's why we have so many gray areas in television nowadays. Cable didn't do this. I mean, yeah, cable had its flaws, but cable stayed true to the TV values. It made sure that whenever they made, and it wasn't just cable, but it was the networks. The networks cared more about original content back then, which means that there weren't a whole lot of revivals and reboots and sidequels and whatnot going on. Instead, there were new TV properties being made, and there were new universes being made altogether. And that honestly made a lot much more sense. Because if you think about it, what happened to networks? Why did they get so lazy? Is it because they want to harp on or jump on the shark, or jump on the train of our nostalgia? Have you ever had a dream where you dream about something that feels so nostalgic even though it isn't? It's as if you've lived a previous life, a life unknown to you. A lot of people say, well, I hope when I die, I get to become a capybara in my second life. I mean, it's a joke, but it's kind of funny. But you gotta wonder, like, why do we have dreams like that bank off of our nostalgia? Why do we allow it? What is nostalgia? It used to be a disease. It did. But I think it's something more than that. It's not a disease. I mean, in a sense, it's not a disease. I think it's just, like I said at the beginning of this video, our brain thinks a certain way, to where we just basically want to have a reunion. We want to see our favorite characters come back one more time to really have a nice send-off. And I think that's really where it came from when TV networks realized how popular nostalgia was. Because they would half-ass the ending of a TV series, and they would make it warranted to where they would need an additional season or an additional special episode to really tie the knot on it and to really tie up those loose ends. And I think I've also talked on here about how it's, well, I talked on my podcast recently how it's so hard to not only find originality, but to also, it's so hard to be original and to tie up loose ends with a TV series. At the very finale, at the series finale, it's so hard to make a series finale because there's a lot of stakes that you gotta make. And unless you didn't do any groundwork ahead, you're not gonna know what those stakes are gonna be until the very end. And that's where a lot of cliffhangers come from, especially with budgets and stuff. Just like with gaming companies, budgets are a problem. Just look at The Sims 4. They can't afford to do shit on that game. And yet they still try. Right? I mean, you gotta give them credit. But in my opinion, in my experience, I think TV networks have gotten lazy. And I think it's time that people realize that our nostalgia means more to us and values more to us, and our headcanons value more to us and are more valuable as a whole than TV networks banking off of it. We can no longer allow them to do that. And some people will say, oh, well, is too much nostalgia a bad thing? In television, yes, because they are making money off of it. They are making money off of your success. Well, off of your... They're making money off of your nostalgia. And that's wrong. If you think about it, nostalgia is really complex. It's weird that we feel nostalgic about just seeing people as a whole. Really weird. It's not normal. But it kind of is, though, too. There was this guy that did this research about nostalgia and how it affects the brain. And he did a lot of, like, experiments and stuff, and I thought it was really interesting stuff. But one of the things that he said was that there were two things in your brain that communicated together, even though they're so different from each other, and that they would rarely communicate with each other. But they do. And when they do, that's when you feel nostalgia. And I have to say, that's one of the most interesting things I've ever heard. Because you have to realize that our brains, we're learning more and more about our brains every single day. And there's always so much more to learn. Because so many people are being born every single day as well. So there's so many new brains being developed over time that we get to see and experiment with that. And we get to see the effects of what that has. And I think that's damn right cool. And I think that that really brings another layer and makes us as human beings more three-dimensional. And that's really cool. Now, I said on Discord, and I'll put it here, that when Criminal Minds does get rebooted or revived, I don't want them to do what they did with season 15, where they sort of put the they put the audience on the back burner. I'm not okay with that. I'm not okay with them doing that. And I don't think I ever will be okay with them doing that. Because you used to feel so much more engaged. And you have to feel engaged. You really do. You know, and... I mean, this is the mothership, for goddamn sake. Right? You had to feel engaged with the show that you're watching. And people aren't gonna feel engaged when characters that you've watched for years upon years upon years just get stupid for no reason. It just happens in the final seasons. It just happens where it's like characters that you've known for years are they just do stupid shit for no reason. They really do. They get sidetracked by something that normally wouldn't sidetrack them for. It's just so convenient to the writers, right? It's so convenient to the networks that it's just like, oh, okay, let's just go with that. Let's just say, oh, this person can't figure out how to shoot a gun. Even though we've never seen them be the sniper before. Like, that's so fucking weird, in my opinion. But back on track. There's a huge problem with season 15 of Criminal Minds. And that's that it doesn't feel that engaging. And so, for season 16, I would like it to feel engaging. Very engaging. Now, for reunions. I've talked about family reunions on this video earlier and how they're important. Whenever you think of TV properties doing reunion specials, I want you to think of that as your old characters getting back together for one last time. Maybe for now it's one last time, but they do another one and then another one and then another one. And yet they still don't get rebooted. So maybe years down the line. I want you guys to think about that. To think about reunions as what they're intended to be. Maybe it's a family gathering. maybe it's a character gathering where all your characters get together one last time and they fight the bad guy. You know, they fight it. Who knows? But a reunion should stay as a reunion. It's a one and done deal unless you want to do more. But normally it's just one special. And it could even be an interview like the recent Friends reunion that happened. But all I know is that we need to stop letting these networks do this to us, where they bank off of our nostalgia. It's wrong. And those are my concluding statements. Anyways, I hope you guys enjoyed this video. If you did, thank you. And I will see you guys in the next one. Goodbye.